Good morning, everyone.
President Pruitt.
Secretary Redu, will you please call the roll?
Regent Bartel?
Here.
Regent Bradley?
Here.
Regent Crane?
Here.
Regent Danae Davis?
Here.
Regent Stan Davis? Regent Drew?
Here.
Regent Evers? Regent Falbo? Regent Loftus?
Here.
Regent Manydeeds?
Here.
Regent Pruitt?
Here.
Regent Schwellenberg?
Here.
Regent Smith?
Here.
Regent Spector?
Here.
Regent Vasquez?
Here.
Regent Walsh?
Here.
Regent Wingad?
Here.
Regent Womack?
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Well, welcome again, everyone. As your agenda suggests and your eyes can confirm, we begin this meeting with a special guest and a recent resolution. I wanted to take the liberty of having my hand on the gavel to make just a couple brief remarks before turning to Regent Walsh, who will no doubt offer his own unique perspective on our guest today. For that, I might suggest you might be well advised to brace yourself. I've been involved in my share of conversations with David Walsh and Jim Doyle in the past, and we are likely to hear more than we will ever want to know about the halcyon days of Madison West, Baskin Hall, Camp Randall, and of course my personal favorite, the good old days when lawyers were really lawyers. For my part, I'd just like to mention something else here. In politics and in life, there are easy fights and there are tough fights. My experience has been that there are no shortage of politicians or elected officials who are willing to take on the easy fights. And in waging them, one would be hard-pressed to find much courage being exhibited or displayed. For over 20 years in this state, as Attorney General, District Attorney, and especially in his last 8 years as Governor, Jim Doyle has taken on tough fights. And I wanted to remind all of us of three of them that, if we aren't careful, can be forgotten or lost in the shuffle. In 2006, some legislators came up with the brilliant idea of a taxpayer protection amendment to the Wisconsin Constitution. TABOR, as it was called, passed all the usual tests for an easy fight. It polled well, and it had a simple-sounding premise. But TABOR was an arrow aimed at the heart of the University of Wisconsin system. I'm proud that this Board of Regents strongly opposed it, but our opposition would have meant little if Governor Jim Doyle had not stood his ground, took on the tough fight, and worked to ensure it did not pass the legislature. Second, for far too long, Wisconsin was the only state in the Big Ten that did not provide domestic partner benefits to our employees. Not only was it not the right thing to do, as all of us in this room know, it placed our universities at a competitive disadvantage with our peers in attracting and retaining the best faculty and staff. Today, because Governor Doyle was willing to take on a tough fight, Wisconsin's employees are treated fairly, and we are the better for it as a state and as a university system. Third, and finally, in our current climate, it is easy and politically popular to look for scapegoats. Children of immigrants are an inviting target. But today in Wisconsin, these young people who have worked hard, done well, and graduated from our state's high schools now have the opportunity to continue in their state's university system because we had a governor who appreciated the need for fairness and doing what's right. So I just wanted to thank this governor, not only for his willingness in the toughest of economic times to try to do his best to protect this university financially, for his work on the covenant and financial aid that I know David is going to talk about, and for his strong support of the growth agenda. But I also wanted to thank him even more for his courage in standing up and being counted on the tough fights that say an awful lot about who we are, what we believe in, and what we stand for, but say even more about who he is, what he believes in, and what he stands for. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, President Pruitt. And in line with those serious comments, I really do intend to be serious. I'm not going to say a word about his older sister. I'm not going to say a word about the boxing matches in the backyard he just didn't want to participate in. I was 2 years older and a lot smaller, I promise you. But in any event, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about Jim Doyle's legacy, and I thank you for the opportunity to introduce Jim and to read the commendation. I was one of Jim's first appointments to the Board of Regents, so I've observed the building of his legacy for his support for higher education. If you will recall, in 2003, This state faced the largest structural deficit in the history of the state, $2.2 billion. That's what Jim Doyle inherited. And from that point on, we know it didn't get a lot easier. And it certainly isn't very easy today with one of the worst recessions we have ever had. But under Jim Doyle's leadership, our base budget has increased 10.6%. That's $108 million over the last 8 years. There's been tough decisions. We've had to share the pain, but he has always looked out for us. And it's not just in dollars that he's looked out for us, but it's been his efforts for higher education have been in many other different ways. This board has repeatedly said to the legislature, to the public, we care about access. And Jim Doyle cares about access, and when it comes to access, Jim Doyle delivered. He encouraged us, probably required us to mainstream the transition between the technical colleges and the two-year colleges and the four-year colleges, and today it's almost seamless. But more important than anything, under Jim Doyle's leadership, financial aid has increased higher than it's ever increased in the history of the state of Wisconsin. Our WEG program, which is the primary needs-based program, he increased that $163 million. That went from $22 to $58 million. The Lawton program, 116%. He increased that during his tenure. The Advanced Opportunity Program increased by 70%, and then he created the Tuition Increase Grants Program, which provided another $12.4 million. But that's not all. The Wisconsin Covenant Program. Jim Doyle was aware that 5-6 years ago, families in the state of Wisconsin that sat around the dinner table in their 5th and 6th grade, their 8th graders, everybody didn't have an expectation of higher education. And he created the Covenants Program. And the Covenants Program is a challenge to 8th graders to prepare and aspire to higher education. We have finally got that passed. We funded it. We have $40 million from Great Lakes. And in the 2009 budget, Jim Doyle put $25 million into it. That is a huge program to families in Wisconsin that in the past couldn't aspire to that. And in large part, because of his commitment, philanthropists such as John and Tasha Mortgage have stepped forward. $175 million for the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars. You put all that together, and Jim Doyle has made a big change when it comes to access to these great institutions. And the result, in 2002, I believe we had 165 students we were educating. Today we educate 178,000 students. In 2009, 33,000 students graduated, an all-time high for the state of Wisconsin. That's improving access. But he has other support, other things than direct support, other things than just access. He has consistently made higher education part of his economic agenda. Higher education to him is the solution, not the problem. It's not something to cut, but it's something to invest in. For example, 4 of his state budgets provided for $761 million in funding for facilities. Together with gift, program revenue, and segregated fees, the number is $1.9 billion. That's an investment in higher education that we don't talk about. He knows how to do that. He didn't have to do it in a fight with the legislature. He did it because he had an agenda, a strategy, and a plan. He's also been a leader in advancing the research component for higher education. Funds for UW-Milwaukee, the Wisconsin Institute of Medical Research, WIMR. Soon we'll have WIMR 2. And of course, the public-private initiative with the WARF and the mortgages for $150 million, 50 from the state, for the Wisconsin Institutes of Discovery that will make us all proud. And why does he do that? Because he recognizes that research in the state of Wisconsin and the Wisconsin idea are the same thing. That's an investment in our economic future, and that's what he believed in. $1 billion of competitive grants comes to the state each year, and UW-Madison leads the way every year with Michigan and UW-Berkeley as one of the top 3 receiving research-based grants. And finally, and most important for me, because I have a concern about research, he drew the line in the sand. When the legislature criminalized stem cell research, he vetoed that bill. he stood up for us. Yes, I believe he has done everything possible for us in initiatives, investments, programs, and most of all, sending a strong message to the people of Wisconsin and to this country that the Wisconsin idea survives, that education is part of the solution, it's not the problem, and that our primary goal should be, and what we believe in, access for the majority, for all of the residents of the state of Wisconsin, to the highest quality educational institutions. At this time, I'd like to read the resolution of appreciation from the Board of Regents for Jim Doyle. And I still haven't said anything about the background. Whereas, throughout his 8 distinguished years as Governor of Wisconsin, James Doyle has demonstrated a deep commitment to advancing the potential, performance, and positive impact of the institutions of the University of Wisconsin system. And whereas, by his leadership and actions, Governor Doyle has done all within his power to help keep the UW system among the best, most accessible, and most affordable in the country. And whereas, from championing a much-needed program of building renovation and new construction on UW campuses, to providing necessary resources and improving access for all Wisconsinites, and supporting the UW system's growth agenda for Wisconsin, to leading and supporting the UW system's initiatives in research and discovery as an engine for economic growth and improving the state's quality of life, Governor Doyle has helped position the UW system for the 21st century's jobs and economy. And whereas the Wisconsin Covenant, the Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery, and state financial aid, which has tripled during his tenure, are just 3 examples of his initiatives in support of higher education and will benefit thousands of students and citizens for years to come. And whereas from all corners of Wisconsin to around the world, including trade visits to China and Japan, Governor Doyle has promoted the University of Wisconsin system with visions and passion at every turn, helping to create opportunities for a great university system to become even greater, impacting more lives, forging valuable new partnerships, and advancing the mission and work of the Wisconsin idea. Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin system highly commends Governor James Doyle for contributing significantly to the legacy of excellence of public higher education in Wisconsin, wishing him continued great success, good health, and much happiness in his future endeavors. Signed, Charles Pruitt, President, UW Board of Regents.
Well, there are many places to start. I won't start in, and David was very nice to me, so I guess I won't start in with him. His father was the boxing coach, and they'd lure the little kids in to see if they would like to box with us. But I just want to say how deeply honored I am. I look around this table, and I had a little bit to do with who's sitting at this table, but it's a really remarkable group of people here, and those that you have succeeded as regents. There has just been great leadership of this university at the regent level, and I thank all of you for your exceptional service. I will tell you, making regent appointments is one of the tasks you almost wish you don't have, because this is the most sought-after appointment that a governor makes. And that's as it should be, because there really is no higher appointment the governor makes than to the people that will lead and ultimately be the ultimate governors of this incredible University of Wisconsin system. And so to all of the regents here, and to the regents again who came before you, I thank you for everything that you have done to support this great university system. I also have had the opportunity to work with 2 really great presidents. When I came in, Catherine Lyle was a seasoned, nationally recognized educational leader, just world-renowned. And I came in, as David mentioned, with a pretty tough budget that I had to deal with. And Catherine, and at that point, Jay Smith, came in and talked and set the tone for my relationship with the university from then on. They came in and sat in my office and said, let's figure out how we do this. We understand there are going to have to be cuts. We have to always figure out what the level of, what sort of tuition increases we can live with in order to be able to manage this. And we sat down and worked through a very, very difficult time. Only later did I realize how much Catherine had gotten out of me when she got tuition increases that have helped this university year after year after year in exchange for one-year cuts. It wasn't a bad deal that she made. But Catherine was a wonderful leader. And I want to thank Kevin for his leadership. I think when Catherine left there, the Regents had an enormous task to replace somebody of that caliber. And you certainly have met that challenge, because in Kevin Riley, we have had a leader through, again, some very difficult times, who has managed to create a vision of growth for this university system, and has been able to work that to that vision, even as the national economy went in the other direction. And Kevin has always worked with me in a completely collegial, helpful, cooperative way, and I'm very thankful, Kevin, for what you have done. I want to also thank the chancellors. I hope I'll have another occasion, maybe in your home bases, to do this. But Wisconsin should be very proud of what's happened over the last couple of years. And I want to tell you, I wish I could tell you, the economy is all moving great and it's all over with, and we're going to look back at this. But we are still in the middle of a very deep recession. And for those of you watching the news, as I know you all do, over the last month or so, this economy is not coming back nearly as strong or as fast as people thought it would. And so we're still in the middle of it. And it takes real management to come through a difficult time. Management that is based on maintaining really high values, maintaining a very clear vision of what you are trying to accomplish, and then figuring out how to do it when you don't have all the resources that you wish you had. And I just want to say I have had a wonderful relationship with all of the chancellors in this state, and I have found them to be, you all to be, remarkable leaders, and some of the newer ones, the chancellors that you replaced, to be remarkable leaders, to keep your campuses in incredibly upbeat and forward-moving mode, even in this difficult time. And the numbers that were stated by David about what we're doing right now is really, we should all be very proud of, educating more students in our system than at any time in the history of the state, in the middle of the deepest recession that we have had since the Great Depression. That takes a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of people who are willing to make some pretty tough decisions. And I've had to do that at the governor's level, and chancellors in this state have had to do it at the campus level. And I tell you, in a few weeks, parents will be dropping their children off at campuses all over the state of Wisconsin for the first year, and moving those kids into the dorms and worrying about whether there's going to be a bunk in the dorm or whether they're, how it's all going to be. And those are going to be the proudest that's going to be the proudest day those parents are ever going to have, the day that that son or daughter goes to a campus of the great University of Wisconsin system. And even in these tough times, and even when those families have had to make big sacrifices in order to get their kids through to that point, and now to be able to have them go to college, just as our parents made for us and their parents made for them, still that moment is an incredibly proud moment. And I don't believe there's a state in the country, in fact, I'll say this with real confidence, where we can be as assured that those sons and daughters that are getting left off on that, I know for all of you, for me, I thought it was a happy day until Jessica and I started just bawling on our way home after our first son went off to college, and we didn't quite realize what a sense of emptiness and loss that whole feeling was, but still it was a sense of great pride. And that feeling, there isn't a state in the country that can speak with such confidence that those young people are going to get the greatest education anywhere in the world. Now, we've done a lot of things, and I really appreciate the recitation of some of them. I just want to mention two that I think are lasting and will be there forever. There's no doubt that we, working together with the help of the state legislature, occasionally having to push them, sometimes they were there with us, have dramatically increased the amount of financial aid that is available. From the Wisconsin Covenant Program to increasing WEG grants to the Lawton grants and through all of them, we have recognized in this state during the last 8 years that there are a lot of really good, hardworking kids that we really need to help make sure can afford an education. And we have to continue on this course. It's far from done. The work of financing an institution of this size, I'll talk to people and they'll suggest, well, when is it all going to be settled, that the university will be well-funded and there will be no money problems? And I'll say maybe in 2505 or something. Because if you look back at history, this is a huge institution, and the needs to finance that institution will go on, and that's why we have regents and chancellors and governors and legislators. It'll go on. But through that, we have to continue to make sure that we have our real eye on affordability, and that we are making sure that young people have the opportunity to get that higher education. The second thing I just want to say is we have really rebuilt, in my time as governor, many of the campuses of this state. And the numbers were there, $2 billion in projects. But whether it's the new academic building going up at Oshkosh or the great new business school at Whitewater, I could go around to all of your campuses and talk about the central buildings that have happened. Those will be there for generations. And I thank you for all of the work that you have done to make it happen. Of course, on the Madison campus, the commitment to research and the building and the funding of research that has gone on continues to make this a place that not only is educating the best citizens, the best students in the world, but is also the center of discoveries that will make people healthier and live longer. We use better sources and cleaner sources of energy and all kinds of other discoveries that will go on. And a little known fact is that that's happening on all the other campuses of this state as well. Obviously, under Carlos's leadership, we have moved in a major way with a commitment towards the University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin-Milwaukee. But we have also seen on all of your campuses people at work who are doing research, both scientific and in the humanities and other places, and making discoveries that will help the world for years to come. So I hope we all jointly take pride in this incredible institution. We live in a tough economic time. We live in a political climate in which cynicism is very much on the ascendancy. We live in a time when popular or public institutions are picked apart here and picked apart there, and this decision that a chancellor made or a president of the university or governor made is analyzed 100 different ways by people who would have, if they could have made the decision, made it a little differently. But in the long run, over the whole course of those decisions and the direction you take, the real focus has to be on how you continue to move this great, great system forward, and how you continue to make sure that some young person growing up in a little town in Wisconsin or in our biggest city who has worked really hard in high school, always wanted to go to college, has the opportunity to go to absolutely world-class higher education. That's what we've done in Wisconsin, and that's something that I am incredibly proud of, and that's something that I hope all of you in this room share in that pride. So thank you all very much for this very, very thoughtful resolution. I look forward. I got a few more months. I'm not going away. In fact, we may have a few more tough things we have to do in the next few months, but we'll do them. We'll do them the way we have done them. We'll do them together. We'll do them talking about how to get this done in the best way, and we'll do it in a way that makes sure that we move this great, great university forward. Thanks, everybody, very much.
Next on our, we're not going to ask you to share. Next on our agenda is the UW Systems 2011-13 biennial budget request. But first, I know President Riley would like to introduce some new colleagues.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, President Pruitt. This is not Chris Markwood's first Regent meeting, but it is his first here in his new capacity as UW Superior's interim chancellor. Chris joined UW Superior as Provost, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and Dean of the Faculty in 2006, and assumed the role of Interim Chancellor on August 1st. So welcome in that role, Chris, and good luck to you. Joining Chris is UW Superior's new Interim Provost. I think she's here, Faith Hensrud. Faith is over here. She previously served the campus as Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Outreach, and Faith and I worked together quite a bit when I was the Extension Chancellor, so it's good to see another hand make good, Faith. So good luck to you in that role. And one more familiar face in a new role is UW Platteville Provost Mitty Nimax. She taught at UW Platteville as a professor of speech communication, later serving for 8 years as Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Education, before being appointed recently as Platteville's Chief Academic Officer by Chancellor Dennis Shields. So Mitty, I think, is over here. Mitty, welcome and good luck to you in your new role. And finally, I'd like to introduce UW Systems' new Associate Vice President for Policy Analysis and Research, Heather Kim. Heather succeeds Sharon Wilhelm in that position. Heather and her OPAR team will continue providing important insights to this board in the way of annual accountability reports and all the other thoughtfully analyzed data that we hope at least inform our policy decisions. Heather comes to us with 20 years of experience in institutional and higher education research, most recently as Director of Institutional Research at Dartmouth College. And Heather, I think you're right here. Welcome. Look forward to working with you. Good luck in your job. So with those introductions made, I think we can go back to our regularly scheduled budget program. President Pruitt.
Well, welcome to all our new colleagues, and I wanted to encourage them as well as our old colleagues to join in the discussion today about the biennial budget and other topics. As we discussed last month, the law requires that UW Systems submit this request to the state in September so that the governor and his staff have time to incorporate our ideas into the larger state biennial budget, which is typically announced in February. As we begin today's discussion, I want to thank my fellow regents for the high level of interest and engagement on this complex topic. Going back to February, we've already devoted a considerable amount of attention to helping President Riley and his staff shape and refine this budget request. Our decision today on the budget request we're making to the state deserves, I think, to be put in a little bit larger context. And it is a context that we've tried to establish during our barnstorming tour over the last month or so, a tour which centered on Principles for Progress and Prosperity, which Jay Smith and I authored, and which tries to provide a long-term strategic context for a bipartisan discussion about the relative priority of higher education in the state's budget. This is, as you will note, the Principles framework, and it's a general framework which we've used for the conversation about the relative priority of higher education in Wisconsin. As I said last month, at every conversation with every editorial board, we have recognized that it's not our role to tell anyone how much to collect in taxes and who should pay those dollars. Those decisions are above our pay grade and left to others in this town to make. But rather, what we've tried to stimulate is a collegial conversation about how many cents of whatever number of dollars are collected should be invested in higher education. And what can we do to ensure a more stable funding base that will enable our campuses to effectively plan for the future. We've made it clear we're not asking for unconditional support. As this diagram that's about to be put up implies, we are prepared to deliver measurable performance against goals that have met with near universal acceptance. This is one of my favorite charts in the principals document that you've probably all seen. It shows how UW's GPR allocation has grown over time relative to other state spending. Back in the early 80s, the state allocated about 14 cents of every tax dollar to the UW system. Today, fewer than 9 cents of every tax dollar collected by Wisconsin goes to support our public university. And if you look at, in your voluminous book at page D8, in case you didn't know there was a test coming, you'll see that by the end of this current biennium, we'll be slipping closer to 8 cents. And I think this slide even more graphically demonstrates the trend in a slightly different way, again showing the days when taxpayers committed 14 cents of every dollar to the public university down to our current level of about 8 cents. When we sat down for an interview when Kevin and I sat down for an interview with Wisconsin Eye, Steve Walters took the liberty of framing this issue up a little bit differently. Using data from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, Steve noted that GPR for the UW system grew by 14% between 1999 and 2010, while overall GPR grew by 27%. Our own budget materials have shown that GPR allocated to corrections during this period, just as an example, not to identify any one in particular, grew by 81%. These are explicit choices about the relative priority of the university in the state budget. And I think they're conversations that we need to have within the context not just of this particular budget proposal, but also, obviously, a bigger question going forward. And I just wanted to make one other note. Every time we've talked about the growth agenda, we've talked about the need for both more state support and the flexibility to adopt more efficient contemporary business practices. If you're like me, this whole budget process can be daunting. There's a lot of material, a lot of numbers, a blizzard of numbers that you need to get comfortable with. But I also wanted to call your attention, if I could, briefly to page B14 of the statutory language changes we're requesting in this biennial budget. And I just wanted to highlight them for a second. As we've traveled the state and met with community leaders and editorial boards, they seem to understand the necessity for the university to be given more flexibility to do our work. And we hear often, not only in these barnstorming tours, but I'm sure in all your conversations over time, that we need the UW to behave more like a business, that it's a big business and it ought to behave a little bit more like one. It's difficult for me, at least, to imagine any business of the size and scope of this one that would not have the ability to decide the number of dollars needed for personnel costs or the flexibility to distribute those dollars to address competitive compensation and retain that business's best employees. It is equally difficult for me to imagine a business which lacked the ability to generate the revenue and then devote that revenue to producing a higher quality product. Two of the statutory changes requested, expanding tuition authority to include educational quality initiatives and authorization to address competitive compensation needs across the UW system, I think would be small but pretty important steps that the state could take to provide our chancellors and university leadership with greater ability to recruit and retain top talent, and give this Board of Regents greater flexibility to selectively use tuition dollars to enhance education quality. I think they're an important part of sort of as we look to the long-term future of the university. I'm going to stop there. I may come back tomorrow to talk very briefly about some of the other things we've learned in the barnstorming process. But let me turn it now over to Kevin, who will take us from this larger context into the nitty-gritty of the details of both our budget proposal, and then obviously we're going to have a lot of conversation around that. Kevin?
Thank you, President Pruitt. And thanks to you, and let me add your thanks to the board. Let me add my thanks to what you already said to the rest of the board members for their time and effort in helping us to develop the budget proposal that you see in front of you today. Last month's special meeting, where we devoted the entire meeting to a look at the budget proposal, such as it was then, provided one additional opportunity to review the overall approach before today's discussion and action today. And we especially appreciate the feedback you provided as we work to assign some numbers to these initiatives. And that discussion at the July meeting, you'll recall, followed individual budget briefings of all the regions, where you had an opportunity to really have a one-on-one conversation with our budget folks and understand as much as you possibly could about where we were going at that point, about where you wanted us to go, provide advice and counsel in that regard. We've obviously worked closely with the chancellors and others on the campuses to shape up the proposal that you see in front of you today. So the focus on that budget you see in front of you today, I think, is very strongly on what we can do to help the state emerge from this economic downturn and have it emerge stronger than it went into the economic downturn. That's been our emphasis in recent months as we try to center the growth agenda for Wisconsin more tightly on specific strategies and goals to produce more college graduates and create more jobs. To achieve these goals, we'll need new investment from the state, just as the circle on the left side there says, to ensure the quality of the education that we offer to these additional students we want to have become UW alumni. And we'll need as well, as Chuck emphasized, increased management flexibility to make better use of the resources the state already gives us. That flexibility really is at some level using the resources we get from the people of Wisconsin in a better way, and I think we owe them that, and we owe our students that. As for state investment, the new initiatives we're presenting today add up to about $83 million. But it's important in saying that to realize that we started with a list of very good ideas for initiatives that was totaled 3 times that size. Based on the direction provided by this board and work with the campuses, we've worked with our institutions to sift and winnow that down from $240 million, that $240 million laundry list, to something much more reasonable, we believe. And that, as you can imagine, that winnowing and sifting process is not an easy winnowing and sifting process. On the one hand, we're cognizant of the state's fragile fiscal condition and the scarcity of public resources. On the other hand, we believe we cannot just sit on the sidelines and wait for somebody else to push our state toward economic recovery. More and more people are convinced that the UW system is an economic catalyst, as it is. And we need to use the UW to get us moving more quickly along the road to recovery and to long-term prosperity. Underlying today's presentation about new ideas are some old and familiar concepts, such as our continued emphasis on affordability and access. That's evident in our request for more hold harmless funding to insulate hardworking families from tuition increases. Earlier this week, I spoke to a legislative study committee that's looking into the topic of student financial aid. My remarks to the committee are in your packet this morning, and you'll see I emphasize to them how absolutely key student financial aid is to the future of all of Wisconsin. It's about getting more of our students into and through some kind of post-secondary education, out the other end, and on to family-sustaining, life-sustaining wages and jobs. Financial aid is a very key part of setting that very positive chain in motion. So while keeping an eye on affordability for our students and our families who are sending their students to us, we also need to maintain our commitment to affordability for the taxpayer. That commitment is evident in the way that we look at growing the number of graduates through increased retention and enrollment. As we work to boost enrollment by 5,900 students in the 2011-13 biennium, on the way to that 80,000 additional degrees in 2025, we know we must drive down the per capita cost. So the amount of funding we're requesting for new enrollments is only 75% of the per-student cost we've used in previous budget calculations. I think that's an important signal from the university to the state and to the people of Wisconsin that we want the UW to do what it needs to do for them in a way that does not break the bank. As we look at the Research to Jobs report and all the worthwhile recommendations it contained, we narrowed that list down to investments that we believe would have the biggest and most immediate return on investment effect. While it's not part of our UW system budget materials, I did want to point out to you this Wisconsin Edge publication from the Wisconsin Technology Council. And I think, again, at least the Regents have a copy of this in your packet. I'm not sure that we had enough to distribute beyond that. It does a good job of telling a great story about Wisconsin's innovation economy, and UW Research is featured prominently. Do you have this in your packets? No? Tomorrow. It'll be in tomorrow morning. Okay, well, you'll see it. Tomorrow morning, then, you can turn to page 7 in this document, and you'll see there a very useful illustration which is taken from the Tech Council's Vision 2020, their strategic plan, and it shows how our current research disciplines intersect directly with areas where the state is working to grow new businesses. It's a very interesting chart, I think, that makes the connection very directly between our research to jobs agenda and where lots of other people are saying this state needs to go in the future with its industries. So it's important to remember that interplay that we've emphasized all along between more grads and more jobs. The two go hand in hand, and we'll continue to press forward on both fronts. In total, the new initiatives that you are considering today represent a relatively modest increase in our operating budget, an average rise in GPR of 2.8% annually. Looking at your budget documents, you'll see that we use that new funding to leverage considerable federal and private dollars. The UW-Madison initiative in the 11-13 budget proposal alone stands to bring in some $35 million in outside funds. As UW-Milwaukee continues to expand and strengthen its research enterprise, we'll see parallel success there. And likewise, as we build research capacity at the comprehensive institutions, we'll put them in a stronger position to compete for outside grants. Along with the strong economic impact that follows our UW graduates, and that now is estimated at a $545 million increase to Wisconsin incomes with each graduating class from the UW system. We graduate about 30,000 students a year, and that turns into $545 million increase in Wisconsin incomes across the state. The growth agenda initiatives that you see will yield a strong dividend beyond just the extra income for those graduates for the entire state for years to come. This is an investment we all need to make. It's an investment with a huge return that the state cannot forego, cannot do without. This is an investment. It's not an expenditure. Repeat after me. This is an investment. It's not an expenditure. That's been a key message that Senior Vice President Morgan and I have shared with people down at the state capitol as we've been visiting with legislative leaders about our budget plans over the last couple of weeks. And I'm pleased to report that we received a warm reception from leaders in both parties, from both houses, as we explained the new initiatives that we'd include in today's presentation. Elected officials from both parties agreed that these are the right directions and sound strategies for the university to use in partnership with the state. There's some obviously understandable concern about the level of state funding that will be available, and nobody's making any promises to anybody, to be sure. But they see the UW as an economic driver. They want us to succeed as a university in what we're proposing here, and they very much seem to appreciate our efforts to communicate and collaborate with them on a broad, dynamic vision for the future of Wisconsin. And I think that's what this budget proposal does. It sets up that kind of collaboration on a broad, dynamic vision for the future of Wisconsin. I'm going to turn this over in just a second to Senior Vice President Morgan to walk us through the budget request. Just let me note that although on your agendas it indicates that we'll start with the operating budget, we will actually flip the order and start with the capital budget presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, President Roddy, for the introduction. As the President indicated, at some point after David Miller has had an opportunity to talk about the capital budget, Sarah Harris and myself will talk about the new investments that are part of the 2011-13 budget. So I guess I'm going to invite up David to talk about the capital budget.
Well, good morning. We're on Resolution 3 in your materials. It follows the operating budget, as Michael indicated. This will be very brief because you gave me the opportunity in July to really present the budget, and there are not significant changes. You have arrived at, through all these briefings and the July meeting, you're at the completion of phase 1 of step 1 of the budget process. So we're making progress. The rest of it will play out between now and next year. This is a summary that you're used to seeing at this time, each biennium, that gives an all-funds picture of the funding for projects being requested by type of funding. So the blue column is the general fund, taxpayer-supported borrowing. The others are program revenue and gifts and grants and totals. The notable thing about this table is that the program revenue is a bit less than half of last biennium. The reason for that is we have nearly completed large new residence hall projects on almost all campuses to create a diversity of residence hall opportunities for students. And I think when we embarked on building suite-style residence halls, a lot of legislators and people wondered if that was going to be a permanent, will all housing go that way? And no. We were seeking a balance of traditional-style residence halls for freshmen and then offering some new opportunities for upper division students to keep them on campus. We've achieved a lot of that. So those higher-cost projects are not here. What you see is there's no new residence halls. You'll see the word renovation and remodeling behind all these projects, and now we're going back and restoring old traditional residence halls to make them more modern. These are the projects that are in the resolution before you today. So the staff recommendation that's in the resolution is for $360 million of general fund borrowing and the commensurate gifts and program revenue that go with those general fund projects. The asterisks mean that they're in the budget, but they are previously enumerated funds from a prior biennium, but they're part of the total budget. These are the program revenue projects that I was just referring to. You'll note that there are many renovations and remodeling. Let me just mention a couple of these. For example, the lacrosse parking ramp. It will only be the second parking ramp we've built at a comprehensive institution. This will allow less neighborhood parking, improve neighborhood relations with the city residents that live all around campus, and allow for the future creation of sites for future building projects that are currently surface parking lots. The Madison Lakeshore Restoration is a project called Alumni Plaza on this request that will restore the whole lakeshore along Memorial Union from the Alumni Center down to the walking path. The athletic performance facility is sort of a misnomer. This is a new building and a partial restoration of the McLean Athletic Center. It's 132,000 gross square feet of new space, which will house intercollegiate athletics functions, UW hospitals and clinics, sports medicine clinic for supportive athletics there, and also an computer-aided engineering center, which will have 24/7 labs for engineering students, and those faculty and students working out of those labs will support the Institute for Discovery, the Wisconsin Energy Institute, and the College of Ag and Life Sciences. So it's called the Athletic Performance Facility. It's really much, much more than that, and is split funded between program revenue from athletics operations and gifts and grants as well to support the academic portions. Only one project on this list has any segregated fees at all, and that's a very small part of the Oshkosh Lincoln School remodel. You authorized us to purchase the Lincoln School previously, and we're remodeling that. About $675,000 of that will be segregated fees to support a daycare center. That will probably only be $13.50 per student for a maximum of 5 years. So that's the only segregated fee in these projects. We are also required to submit a 6-year plan with our capital budget, with the biennial budget. So this is in your materials. It's just to give you a snapshot of what's out there, and if projected bonding levels hold up and we can continue some modest increases in general fund borrowing, how those increases and new borrowing requests would be allocated. There are some unknowns in here. We have to deal with heating plants around the state. That's not indicated in here, and this would be revised when we have more clarity on how we're going to deal with heating plants around the state. So finally, in conclusion, the next steps are there are a couple of projects that were not fully developed enough to bring to you at this point. You may recall from future biennia, we almost always have a December supplemental request. So we'll continue to develop those projects and bring them to you. Included in that will be advance enumeration request to enumerate the UW River Falls Health and Human Performance Facility, a facility that you've heard about for a very long time. We are seeking full funding of that project in the 13-15 biennium. We would like it enumerated in this biennium so we can complete the design and be ready to bid with funding available in July of 13. With that, I'll close and just ask if you have any questions, and thank you for your patience. Seeing none?
Questions from the board? Yeah?
I just want to move approval of Resolution 3.
I have one question.
Regent Walsh.
Go back to the athletic. I thought you said program revenues and gifts and grants.
Yes, I can break that out for you. The proportion of each. Yes, it's the 49.2 and the 27.6.
Okay. All right, that is it.
That is the correct breakout.
I'll ask it.
Okay, and again, the program revenue portions support the athletic, and the clinic is considered a program revenue operation too, and then the gifts will support the academic portion.
Any other questions? If not, Regent Bartel has moved approval of Resolution 1.3. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Back to you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, David. As President Riley has indicated, we're going to talk just a little bit about now our operating budget, our 2011 operating budget that includes a number of new investments. These actually are follow-on investments that have which will continue to fuel the growth agenda that the university offered some time ago, about 4 years ago. But before we get into the new initiatives, what I want to talk about real briefly is something that you won't see in this budget. Typically, in the 2011-13 budget and our biennial budgets, you would see a request and a discussion about the first two items on this list here, and that's cost to continue and program revenue requests. However, today, the board is being asked to approve only the proposed budget requests for new initiatives. And we're asking that largely because we do not have all the information and data that we need to make a request on the part of the board in terms of what, and setting the cost to continue and program revenue portions budget. But because it is important that we discuss program revenue and cost to continue, what I've included is just a few slides to give you some idea of what are those component parts of cost to continue. And as you can see from here, from this slide, there are important components that need to be considered. We need to get right. I think it was Chancellor Martin who talked about last time, or asked a question last time about what are we going to do about protecting our base and ensuring that we have adequate funding going forward and ensuring that those things that we're already doing in our colleges and universities in the system are adequately funded so that we can move forward. Part of that discussion is a discussion with the Department of Administration about things like fringe benefit rates, the nuts and bolts technical aspects of budget making. So we have to talk about increasing financial aid programs, student technology fees. And then we'll have to look at, as I indicated before, some things that are part of our discussion, what we call standard budget adjustments, related to things like fringe benefits rates, funding of classified salary increases, labor contracts is a better way of talking about that bullet point. We also want to talk about something related to reinstatement of furlough savings that were part of the last budget. The furlough initiative is intended to end at the end of this biennium. We'd like to see that folded into our cost to continue number. So there are a number of very important discussions that we have to have as it relates to cost to continue. We will continue to have all of those discussions to ensure that we get that number right. As it relates to cost to continue, as I indicated before, we're having good discussions with the Department of Administration. Technical instructions were received by University System on August 4th. Base budgets should have been determined this week. In fact, we thought we had our base budget number on Tuesday, and as it turned out, that number was incorrect, so we go back to DOA to continue our discussions there. In fact, we're a little bit concerned that we may need an extension beyond the September due date to make sure that we have the right number as it relates to cost to continue. Some of the same challenges are in play when we talk about program revenue authority. That is, how do we set a program revenue budget? There, we're thinking more about appropriation amounts. As you know, these dollars are outside of the GPR fund that we look at, but it's vitally important that we get the appropriation lines right as it relates to use of gift and trust dollars, general operating receipt, and auxiliaries as are listed there today. As we go into our discussion about new investments, I think it's important to point out a couple of things. Number one, President Riley is absolutely correct. In our discussions with legislative leadership, we have gotten a very, very positive response with regard to the policy direction that the UW system is proceeding with this budget. As I indicated, we're making a number of follow-on investments, investments that have driven the growth agenda in prior biennial budgets, and new initiatives that will take us to the next level in terms of graduating more students and creating jobs through research in the state of Wisconsin. We had a good signal from the governor and the budget office, and you can imagine that that signal would have been positive given the remarks that the governor made here today and his interest in ensuring that the university system remains strong. All departments in state government were told, don't ask for any additional GPR spending. The exception was the University of Wisconsin system, and the instructions read, we want you to do things with your new investments related to research activities focused on economic growth and development. I think that is probably the best endorsement we could have had going into this budget process by having the governor basically say to us, I want to see your ideas. I want you to put them forward. I want to see what your next iteration of ideas are as it relates to the growth agenda. The exception is also, another exception is cost to continue. I think there's a recognition there also that we need to get that base budgeting correct. And then there's an exception for other programs like K-12 education, which as Regent President Pruitt's slide indicates, has been treated also very well by the state and Governor Doyle. So having said that, I'm going to invite Associate Vice President for Budget and Planning, Peter Harris, to walk through some of the new investments in the 2011-13 budget, unless you have questions of me regarding cost to continue and program revenue. Rita?
Good morning. As we've been discussing the new initiatives since the beginning of this year, they are all tied to the growth agenda and the goals that we have, the two core goals that you've seen several times. Because we've had many discussions of it, I'm going to try to move through these relatively quickly and just give you the highlights of what's included in here. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask afterwards. The core goals that the university have for the growth agenda are more graduates and more jobs, and those are undergirded by the foundational activity of having a competitive university workforce. Under more graduates, we are focusing on the first 5 years of the systems plan to have an additional 80,000 graduates cumulatively for the state of Wisconsin by 2020-25. This will be accomplished by increasing the retention of students. We're going to retain 2,200 additional students by fall 2016 and increase access by another 3,700 students by fall 2012 for a combined increase of 5,900 students. The efforts to increase access will also include work on increasing the pre-college pipeline, which has to be done for us to see the types of graduates that we would need. Improving access and retention is a piece that is absolutely essential to that is affordability, and the governor mentioned that earlier today. So in improving affordability, there are a couple of different things that we are working on right now. One is increasing funding for WEG, which has moved through the Higher Educational Aids Board, and the other piece is the tuition increase grant, which would help provide affordability for middle-income families. Under the more jobs piece, we're looking at the research to jobs proposals and initiatives related to growing the research infrastructure. So part of the research and more jobs piece will be increasing funding for the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee Research Initiative Phase 2, a Madison Graduate Assistant Initiative, and digital research funds for the libraries under the UW System Libraries Research Commons Initiative. We're also looking at some of the recommendations that were included in the Research to Jobs recommendation and implementation report that was brought forward at the June meeting, and that includes establishing 3 emerging technology centers, developing entrepreneurial courses, development of portals and websites, and developing the research infrastructure for the comprehensive institutions by allowing more faculty to participate in research, providing seed funds, grant funds, matching grant funds, bridge funds, and also having the grant writers and administrators at the institutions. Again, in order to do this, we need to make sure that we have the workforce that is necessary to move forward with having more graduates and also doing the more jobs piece. Part of that would include asking for the reinstatement of a 2% state pay plan that was rescinded in June 2009 as an equity measure. That was provided, the 2% increase was provided to the represented employees who had contracts non-represented employees, including faculty, staff, and non-represented classified employees, did not receive that, so part of the budget request is to have that. There will be more discussion of where we will go as far as recommendations for pay plan in 2011-13, and the process for that will be reviewing the Competitive University Workforce Commission recommendations that were presented to President Riley at the June board meeting, and having the board have a discussion of what you would like to move forward with on pay plan later this year for submission to the Office of State Employment Relations. When we look at the new initiatives that we've been talking about, the total amount that we're looking at on an annual ongoing basis is $83.2 million. $22.2 million of that is related to more graduates for increasing access, retention, and pre-college programs. $10.5 million is for the tuition increase grant. $8.2 million is for comprehensive research initiatives. $10 million for the Milwaukee Initiative for Research. $5.4 is for the Madison Graduate Initiative. $6 million is for the Libraries Research Initiative, which will impact all of our campuses, and $20.9 million is the reinstatement of the 2% pay plan. As we look at what we are requesting as new initiatives for 2011-13, $66 million of that is new resources from the state. $17 million would need to come from increased tuition revenues, for a total, again, of $83.2 million. And this compares to the growth agenda request for 2009-11 of $50.9 million for moving forward with initiatives related to growing jobs and growing access. Region President Pruitt talked about the need for statutory language changes. Most of the statutory language changes that are included in the budget are continuing requests that we've had in prior years. The two new ones are related to the ability to provide high educational quality for all of our students and the ability for the board to establish tuition levels that will allow you to do that. And the other piece is the board's authority to address competitive compensation based on the amount of money that the state is going to provide for pay plan, but looking at all resources available to the regions to determine what you can do or would like to do as far as compensating your staff. The last part of the budget that we're required to do is to submit performance measures. We're required to do 4 performance measures each biennium. The 4 performance measures we have in the budget are enrollments, second-year retention, graduation rates, and undergraduate degrees. The performance measures have been revised to reflect the work that is being done on the growth agenda. In September of 2008, we had a discussion with the board about the fact that the performance measures we had used previously with the Department of Administration were not the same ones that we would need to have as we move forward with the growth agenda. We wanted to have ones that we could use to show that we're actually making progress to where we want to be. Undergraduate degrees really is undergirding the whole growth agenda process. We want to have 80,000 additional graduates. We need to be able to measure that. When we look at enrollments, previously what we had looked at was FTE, and that was a way of looking at finances and what types of finances were needed on the campus. But when campuses enroll students, they enroll students, and so the head count makes a lot more sense for the work that we're doing. The accountability report is being revised as well, and has been revised to reflect a lot of these same measures, and so that is why the changes that we have in the document related to performance measures are somewhat different from where they've been in prior biennium. At this point then, we are asking you to consider the resolution number 2 that is in your document, and I'll turn it over to...
As As part of Resolution Number 2, the board is being asked to delegate the authority to the UW system president to submit the cost to continue and program revenue requests at a later date after we receive those numbers, after we've been able to do the calculation to make sure we have the right numbers, and include that in the budget. We're also asking that we, if necessary, have the authority to even submit those numbers later than the September 15th deadline. We will bring the program revenue and the cost to continue numbers to the Board of Regents at your October meeting, so you have a thorough opportunity to review them.
Thank you. Can I suggest that potentially we could have a motion to approve this and then go through conversation? So the motion, is there a second? Second. We're on. Regent Davis.
Okay, I don't know if this is a question for Kevin, Mike, Frida, all three, none of you chancellors, so I'll just ask the question. And it has to do with slide number 10 and the list, among the list of new initiatives, there is the increase of the pre-college program, pipeline. And for my money, it seems as though that's more of a create and improve pre-college programs as a pipeline as opposed to increasing them. But that's just maybe semantics. The point I want to make is, or the question I want to ask are there specific goals at the campuses who currently have pre-college programs that target percentage increases to affect that pipeline increase?
I think I'm going to ask someone who was not part of your list of choices to answer that question. Senior Vice President Rebecca Martin.
There we go.
Thank you.
Just to keep Regent Davis off base, we're going to do that.
Right.
I'm happy to be off.
This investment in pre-college programs is not related to the programs for multicultural and disadvantaged students within the pre-college programs that we've had in place for many years. This is a new investment for UW Extension's portion of the More Graduates initiatives, which is to develop programs utilizing their 4-H network across the state, making those programs more focused on providing college-ready opportunities for youth in all of the counties in the state. So it's a pre-college pipeline initiative that will be in addition to those that we have. It is not campus-based, it is county-based. Did I do that justice, Christine?
Okay, that's great, but, and there is a but. What is your position on whether there should be some kind of alignment of some kind with the existing invested pre-college programs at the campus level? There
definitely is a need for an alignment there, and we are working on bringing a number of our programs under the umbrella of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The Know How to Go network, for example, is now being overseen, and that's a statewide network with our partners in other sectors. We're working on that along with our traditional M&D pre-college program. We'll coordinate that with the extension program. We're working to try to bring all of these together so that we think of pre-college as more than the narrowly focused pre-college program definition that we've used in the past.
Right.
And the other thing I'd add, Regent Davis, is that, and as Associate Vice President Harris mentioned, we have that new goal about degrees. That's one of the performance goals for DOA, but more importantly for ourselves. The ultimate, in my mind, the ultimate judgment about whether pre-college programs are successful is whether the students who go through those programs get a degree, actually graduate. And we're going to be, part of the money for the new initiatives is specifically to add degrees, and those are based on goals we establish campus by campus with each chancellor and his or her leadership team as we build to that 80,000 level. And after we get that going, we're going to monitor those goals, and as we look to the future, we're going to develop some kind of funding model that will allow rewards to be made to campuses that are meeting those goals.
And I'm really glad to hear that. As you all know, I work with teen girls in Milwaukee, and I am going to end on this note. And I do find in that experience that as the young people, at least the ones that I'm aware of and that I interact with, are made aware of pre-college or college as a destination through the pre-college experiences that they're having, to me, we can leverage that. I mean, because, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, many of them are first generation, and I just think having them go, you know, summer after summer to Stout, for example, I can think of one young lady in my head, and to not have us be talking to Ebony, you know what I mean, just doesn't quite, it seems like it's a miss. So I'm hopeful that we do pipeline to graduates, as you indicated. So thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Regents, ma'am.
Can I just follow up, Ken, with one thing President Riley just said? You said you might be organizing or putting together a reward system for those campuses who meet the goals that I think I saw somewhere when we originally talked about this. How is the initial money, assuming we get the funds that we were talking about, how would the initial determination be made as to what each campus gets? I mean, are we looking at...
Well, that portion for the degree increase will be based on the numbers we developed with each of the campuses for those.
So if somebody is trying to get a 10% increase as opposed to a 2% increase, the 10% increase would get a higher percentage of the funds?
Of that portion of what we're asking for, yeah.
Okay.
Regent Loftus.
Well, this is a question for President Riley, and it's on the colleges and what are the performance measure for the colleges. And you know, we've had some of this discussion, and I sent some documents to the other regents, and I hope at some point you get a chance to look at them. But we have a 6-year graduation rate in the colleges of below 30%. We have to get an associate degree over a 3-year period, we're at below 20%. For students of color, first of all, it is amazing how few there are. And second, that graduation rate or success rate is about 16.6%. And if you look at the Milwaukee Journal editorial of August 14th, where the first line is, if you're an African American or Hispanic student enrolled in the University of Wisconsin system, right now your chances of emerging with a degree aren't good. And they single out Milwaukee, Whitewater, and Madison, but I mean, the colleges have to look. This, of course, is in the relation or the context that for several years now we have encouraged students to go to the colleges by offering a lower tuition there. And I don't think or at least I can support that in the future, where if you have, of every 10 students that go, 7 aren't going to make it. So on our chart in our budget, we had the performance measurements, and they're pretty easy to understand for the 4-year institutions. And so just your comments on what are the performance measures for the colleges.
Sure. Let me start, and then I think other colleagues may want to join. And we had a good conversation about this before the meeting. You cited a couple pieces of data. One was that in terms of a 6-year graduation rate, it's less than 30% of folks who start at the colleges as freshmen wind up with a baccalaureate degree 6 years later. The other piece of data you need to know, all of you, is that 80% of those students are still actively enrolled, pursuing a degree. So what's going on here is an access institution which takes a lot of students who otherwise would not go on to college at all, who generally are poorer and often are less well prepared than students going into many of our academically prepared, many of our other institutions, and starts them off. They often, from what we can tell, will stop out more frequently, will have financial or other kinds of crises that cause them to drop numbers of credits that they might have started in a given year. But the fact is that 80% of them are still trying to make it. You said 70% don't make it. that's not true, because others make it after 6 years. Now, is that too long? We'd like it to be shorter, but the facts are that this kind of population is probably going to be the population that takes longest to get to a degree. I think I might have mentioned this at a previous meeting. When I was in New York, the City University of New York did a study which showed that at a number of their colleges which enrolled, were open admissions and enrolled poorer students from the urban population in New York City, there was a real uptick in the number and percentage of students who earned a degree after 10 years. Now, is that too long? Yeah, we'd like it to be shorter, but you're dealing in some instances with very stressed lives of students who nonetheless then go on and pursue the degree. Let me go to another datum that you mentioned, the associate degree graduation rate. One of the things that often happens from what we can tell looking at the research there is that students who are doing pretty well at the tech or at the UW colleges move on before they get the degree into one of our four-year institutions. So the fact that they don't get an associate degree does not mean that that's necessarily a bad thing, although in conversations with the colleges that we had around their role in the growth agenda and what their goals would be, one of the goals we agreed with them that they would have is to get more of their students to complete an associate degree, and I think that fits in nicely with the broader effort we're trying to make around more earning of associate degrees along the way. The editorial that you mentioned did start the way you said it started, but you didn't mention that it ended by saying the University of Wisconsin has a number of very interesting programs in place to get at the issue that you're raising. And as a matter of fact, we're charter members of the Education Trust. The person who wrote that editorial is the president of the Education Trust, Katie Haycock, and we're charter members of a system of their Access to Success program. And I think I want to let Senior Vice President Martin respond in a couple additional ways, Regent Loftus.
Okay, I just wanted to mention the Access to Success program is one in which each one of the 23 public university systems that's part of it has made a commitment to cut the access and achievement gap in half for underrepresented minority and low-income students by 2015. And those goals are built into the More Graduates goals for each one of our institutions, including the UW colleges. We've just completed a transfer equity study with our partners in the technical colleges to look at the transfer pathways, particularly for underrepresented minority students, and have some very specific recommendations that we're working with the institutions on to improve access and success for students of color in the transfer pipeline, because we know from the work that we did in the UW colleges and the equity scorecard that we are not making as strong a use of that pipeline as other states are for underrepresented minority students. And we would agree with you that the numbers are surprisingly low for students of color in the UW colleges. Through the equity scorecard, they've developed a number of new recruitment and strategies that are reaching into populations that they were not reaching before, and being much more targeted in their enrollment management initiatives to increase that pipeline. So I think that there are a number of things in place. We do have specific targets established both for access and for student success, retention, and graduation at the colleges, as we do for all of our institutions as part of More Graduates, and we'd be happy to share those specifics with you if you'd like to see them.
Well, just to...
We do have the Interim Chancellor of Extension and Colleges, Marv Van Kekkeriks, with us. And Marv, I want you to know I did introduce you last month as a new interim when you weren't here, so I didn't much... Good.
Marv, could you find a microphone?
Why don't you come up to one of the mics?
I wanted to add sort of one additional thing to this, and that really has to do with the nature of part-time students. About a third of our students in the colleges are part-time students. The likelihood that they will complete on the same 6-year degree completion track as a full-time student is not so great, just given the circumstances. And also the fact that so many of them, a large percentage, somewhere in the 45% range, are in the bottom half of their high school class. So they are going to take a bit more time to get to their degrees. We did take a quick look at full-time new freshmen. We were looking at the 99 group that came in and tracked them out over a 7- and 8-year period. By the end of the 7th year, 85% of them had completed. By the end of the 8th year, we were in the 92% range. So what's going on here is it's simply taking them longer to get to the goal that they have. The other piece that I would add to this is, if we're moving down the sense of a growth agenda, a good deal of that growth is going to come from people who aren't in those top 50% of their class. And they're going to be people who are also often geographically isolated, unable to move to the comprehensives and other places where they might pursue those degrees. So I think in one sense what we have are some measurements that don't fit the nature of the population that we're serving very well. A population that we will have to serve if we're going to meet our growth agenda goals. And I would ask Greg if you had anything you'd like to add to that, too.
The only thing I'll add, and Marv stated some of our most recent findings extremely well, is one population that often gets overlooked and makes us a bit distinctive in the UW system is our adult student population. As you know, adults also take longer time to degree. I'm looking at Stephanie here, and she's nodding her head, which also accounts for our students taking a longer time to get to degree. And I just wanted to make that point as well, that we have to really look beyond the traditional measures and look into our student populations to really understand the nature of what we're working with in the colleges. And we don't see this as a problem. We see this as a challenge. And, of course, it's a badge of pride for us as well to be able to help our adult students particularly maneuver their way through our higher ed environment and get to the 4-year campuses and then get on to the bachelor degree. So,
and I'd like to make one more point, which is that I think if you look at the chart that was part of the data that was circulated to you that Regent Loftus asked for relating to ACT scores, you will see that the UW colleges is serving a very different population of students than than most of our comprehensive institutions. So it's not surprising that the institutions that open their doors to any person in our state that wants to explore a college opportunity is not graduating students at the same rate that institutions that are taking the top tier of high school students from high school. Our UW colleges are the open door that we provide to the state of Wisconsin, and that's a very important function for people to come into whether or not they end up with a degree. So we're serious about success for these students, but we also need to understand that it's a much more complex picture than trying to just compare less than 30% make it all the way to a college degree compared to what you would see at, for example, UW La Crosse.
And then I'll come to you.
Well, these are the numbers we keep. So if you accuse me of not citing numbers that are out there, this is what we keep.
Right.
First and second, these numbers are for full-time freshmen. The 80% figure is 80% of the 26%. It's not the 26% goes to 80.
That's right.
And
But
where some of these campuses are located, there are many, many students of color. And you look at that enrollment and that rate, it is just depressing. The question is, what is the performance measure for the colleges?
Well, first of all, the UW colleges are not located in Madison or Milwaukee, which are places where we have very large proportions of minority students. And a lot of the colleges are in fairly isolated rural areas. Okay? So that's where many of them are located. Not all of them, many of them. But I think we have performance goals, and they're embedded, as we said. When we were building the 80,000 degree goals for the system as a whole, we met with then Chancellor David Wilson and his leadership team, Greg Provost and others, to talk about these. And there are goals we can provide you for the colleges within that context. And as you and I talked yesterday, we want them to be part of that context. And this is an area where we do need to have improvement. There's no doubt about it. but there's more context to it. And, I mean, we need to focus on the numbers that we use on our dashboard, I'll call it, and they're good numbers to focus on. They're important. There are other numbers that are important to know if you want the wider context, and one of them is, for instance, that we know that people who have some college credit make higher salaries on average than people who have only a high school diploma. And the more credit you earn, the more, on average, the higher salary you will have. If you get to a degree, it jumps up again. But the fact is, along the way, you're building a better life for yourself. And again, back to the adult student population idea, no doubt, some of the students from the UW colleges who don't complete a degree in 6 years will come back later as working adults and work to complete a degree then, using the credits that they have taken when they came out of high school and went into the UW colleges. So are these numbers where we would like them to be? No. Do we have new and higher goals for them? Yes. Will we continue to work on them? You bet. But they're part of our overall strategy.
Regent Schwab.
Having just graduated myself from one of the UW colleges, UW Waukesha, which is, I believe, the largest of the colleges, I have some observations and opinions that I would like to share for discussion here. UW Waukesha, like I said, is the largest of the UW colleges, and it is in an area that isn't entirely rural, it isn't entirely urban, but it has a pretty good diversity level. Having worked in the pre-college programming there and in the multicultural and diversity areas, I think that there is a need to strengthen the outreach ability of these kinds of programs in these areas. And I think that the measure of the UW colleges should be in the attitude of the students and the staff, whether the students are offered hope, what their outlook toward their future is. I think that those are really important things to look at that don't always show in the numbers. And I know that there is difficulty in recruiting traditional students to these UW colleges because a lot of the traditional age students are looking for this typical college experience that might include dorm living and, I don't know, et cetera, et cetera. So, like we've been discussing, some of the colleges are less urban than others, and but I think that we need to invest in those pre-college programs at the UW colleges in particular, and congratulate those returning adult students and those who maybe need to take their time and stretch out their education for continuing to plug away at it. And I don't like to hear the discounting of the importance of the colleges because I've seen a lot of people reached very deeply in these institutions, I myself being one of them. I feel that going to one of the colleges, it's not just about the money that can be saved, but it offers a unique ability to interact on a different level with the academic staff and faculty, similar to the likes of a private institution. And a lot of the professors who choose to educate in this setting do so because of the increased opportunity for interaction with students, and they have a passion and like that opportunity to pass it on. And I've seen that happen several times myself. I just want to share that observation. So another thing, just a point to put out there for attracting more multicultural students, maybe there could be some sort of academic program or student life initiatives that could attract more students from more urban or more diverse communities. I don't know, something for discussion at a later date. Just wanted to put that out there. And I wanted to thank you for looking at this and sharing your concern for this, and I do understand and appreciate that.
I think that you have a great value to offer to the board going forward on this issue. The most surprising numbers in here are Waukesha, when you look at it. Very surprising. And, you know, 57% of the students have ACT scores over 20. I mean, let's not suggest that the scenario is played out here that where and open access, we've gone through periods of open access and have revisited whether that is a reasonable policy given fiscal constraints. So, thank you, and I'll look forward to the measurements that are coming.
Thank you, Regent Loftus. Regent Vasquez. I think some of you might know that I was raised in San Antonio, so I have a little bit of a vested interest in what happens in the Southwest, and some of you may have even guessed that I'm Mexican, so I think I have a little vested interest in that population. The discussion that we're having is one that is just so full of complexities. One of the things that I originally thought was that the community college, in our case, the Wisconsin Technical College system, was really going to be that very rapid movement of students of color, and in my personal interest, Hispanic students, quickly into a baccalaureate degree setting and graduation. While I personally have a strong yearning and desire and a great sense of urgency that we do need to see those numbers increase, I have also come to resign myself to the fact that this is going to take a tremendous amount of time and tremendous amount of effort, and that we have to look at each and every one of these groups very specifically and not look for cookie-cutter solutions. And let me give you something that I was very surprised with as I was reading some information about the Southwest, and in particular, Texas. And what I read were several articles that were unveiling how poorly the community college system in Texas was doing in precisely what we're talking about. And it was talking about Hispanic students, Mexican-American students, that they were coming in, but they weren't making the transfer, and they were not graduating. And here you are talking about Texas, lots of Hispanic influence and presence. And so what I found very interesting was a couple of points. One was the Hispanic or the Mexican-American students. One of the things that they were lamenting is the commuter aspect of it, and the fact that they have to go home and there's tremendous influences still bearing upon them every day. And unfortunately, those influences were not necessarily saying, go back, go back, go back. It's mom lost a job, dad got reduction in whatever, brother or sister is now in the gangs. And so they were being confronted with that every day. And it's not surprising that for some of these young men and women, then college education was not the primary goal. It was family survival or whatever. The other thing that I found very interesting was, for the younger ones, the desire to have that as quickly as possible, as you were saying, Jessica, that baccalaureate 4-year campus experience. And what I gathered from that was, is that a place, and I'm talking now to the comprehensives to not let you off the hook on this, to say that's where maybe for the younger, and I can only speak for Latinos, and I can't speak for African Americans and Native Americans, but I can only speak from what I read in my own world experience, that maybe we do need to get them into those comprehensives as quickly as possible and remove them from having to go daily back to those family life experiences that are not encouraging and motivating them to go. As a matter of fact, it's working to the detriment of their pursuit of a college education. So I'm very glad that you're very attentive to that, and I'm glad that we're having the discussion, but I think we have to come to grips with this is a very complex topic that requires, and I'm extremely proud of the UW system, that we're not looking, and we should not be looking for the cookie-cutter approach. I am still a very strong supporter of what Extension is trying to do, but I'm not going to rest as one regent and as a Hispanic, I'm not going to rest my hopes and wishes that the Extension is going to be the premier one that's going to get Hispanics through college. because there's a distinction between the older adult Hispanic and the younger adult Hispanic, and we can go on and on. I just think that this is a wonderful discussion, but let's not lose sight. It's not a very easily solvable problem, and we need to commit to the long haul and not settle on just looking for very quick cookie-cutter solutions, because we're going to get very frustrated. Thank you.
Regent Drew, then come to you.
I'm pleased that the part of the request is for a reinstatement of the rescinded 2% pay plan. And I just, maybe somebody could remind us who has the figures just how far behind our peers, our faculty and staff are. And if we don't get this rescinded, obviously we'll be continuing to fall further behind. I mean, even if we get it, we'll be behind. So I don't know if that's a setup for Mike.
Let me ask the co-chair of the Competitive Compensation Committee to comment.
Well, for specific numbers, I refer you to the report of the Competitive Workforce Compensation Committee. But certainly, other than a couple of categories, I believe at Madison in the assistant professor and below professor category, we were substantially behind almost everywhere in compensation measured without fringe benefits. If fringe benefits were measured, we were up somewhat, but nevertheless no better than the median and generally below.
The materials in the board packet on page 310 show that by the end of the 11-13 biennium, we're expecting to be 15.14% behind our peers, and so we're about 11%, I think, at this point behind.
Regent Crane.
Two comments. The discussion that has taken place primarily focused on the colleges, but has also had a lot of other aspects that are concerned throughout the system. I would suggest that some of that discussion ought to be continued within committees. In our case, particularly in my case, particularly in the Education Committee. A lot of aspects of those have been part of our ongoing discussions, but I know this afternoon we're talking about priorities, for instance, for our committee work for the next year, and many of those, I'm going to remember many of the aspects of this conversation. And as to the remark that has just been made about compensation, looking at our support of the budget, the proposed budget in general, I think that we need to talk about being competitive as a state and thinking about that this kind of conversation is taking place a lot, I assume, all around the country. And in order for us to do what needs to be done within this state, we have to make sure that we are preparing graduates, and that we're doing it in quality institutions, and certainly those things are relevant. And I think that point needs to be made strongly as we promote our budget.
Thank you. Regent Bartel.
My question has to do with the more graduates portion of the operating budget, specifically the objective of adding 5,900 students in the next biennium. The request is for $22.6 million for that purpose, which is described in the materials as only 75% of the equivalent of 2008-2009 state support per student. Remember that we were told that the cost per student in the system is $2,300 below the national average already, and that the cost to Wisconsin taxpayers to support public higher education is $211 per capita per year, less than in 36 other states. How can we, where do we come up with 75% or a 25% cut in that per capita state support? And is this something that's going to continue into the future? I mean, we already are low in state support per capita a student. How can we justify 75% of that now?
It's a fair question. I'll ask Michael and Frida to comment on a piece of this about the way we divided between new enrollment and retention funding and within the amounts that you're talking about. But let me address the broad thrust of your question, as I understand it, Regent Bartel. As we've worked this through with the chancellors, and this is true nationally, if we just took the current cost per student, whether it's here or the national average or any individual state's average, looked at the kinds of numbers we would need to add to degree earners to get to 55% of the population with a college degree, which is the national goal, and we just said, well, we're going to do this at the current cost per student, which largely is calculated assuming what is still a very large part of our population, that is the traditional 17 or 18-year-old who comes onto a campus as a freshman, stays there using all the academic and other services that that campus provides and incurring costs over 4 or 5 or 6 years. If we assume that the cost based on that kind of behavior by students is the one that we'd use and just multiply that out by the number of new degrees, the cost would be so astronomical that we just knew we could never get there. Now, we said all along, part of the gain in the 280,000 is going to come from new enrollment. But some of those will not be traditional students. Some of the gain is going to come from better retention and graduation of the students we already have, getting them out more efficiently, more quickly, having more of them actually graduate to degree. And then the third way we've said we'd do it is through better degree completion activity, largely with working adults who have some credit, things like credit for learning demonstrated from prior experience, baccalaureate completion programs where we ask folks who've left with a semester or two of credit whether they are interested in coming back to complete that degree. So a lot of those working adult students, and this in a way goes back to Regent Loftus' question, who have some credit but no degree. Again, we've reason to believe based on surveys we've done that there are more than 1 million people in Wisconsin who have some college credit but no degree, almost a fifth of the population. If we can get them to come back, recognize some of the prior learning they've done, recognize the credit that they've earned already, we think we can get them on to a degree at a lower cost per student than if you say, well, everybody's a 17 or 18-year-old who's going to be on the campus full-time for 6 years. So that's sort of the 30,000 foot of it, but let me ask Michael or Frida to give you a little more explanation of how we divided out how we were looking at the cost per student between the money we're asking for new enrollment and the money we're asking for retention activities.
As President Riley mentioned, we did treat the increased access or enrollments differently from the increases in retention. We know that we're going to have to change the way we provide services and education to students as we bring a different population of students forward. We have to do a wider, deeper cut. Students who traditionally have not been attending higher education are going to need to attend in order for us to achieve the goals that we have. So we need to look at the gateway courses that we have. We need to do high-impact practices. We need to look at those students and more tailor some of the programs that we have so that we can retain those students or bring those students into our institutions and retain them. So when we're looking at funding, we're looking at 100% of the current cost to educate those students, because it is going to cost money to offer those types of programs, money that is new resources to the institution that will help them with doing those kinds of things. When we're looking at new enrollments, though, because everything that we've heard and that we understand is that the funding model is broken, we are going to need to change the cost structure as we move forward in order to educate the larger pool of students that we are going to have. That's where we're looking at doing the 75% with more online, more credit for life experiences, more collaboration between institutions that already have programs, improved transfer opportunities. Those kinds of things are ways that we're hoping to look at that 75%. And one of the things is, if you're looking at not having a traditional population, you're not necessarily looking at having to expand as much of your physical capacity, which would also have implications on your costs. So it's a number of those things that we're trying to take into consideration.
So is it fair to say that as we move toward an additional 80,000 graduates in the next 15 years, that the cost per student is going to continue to go down?
The hope is that the cost per student would continue to go down. Again, I think there are some other things that are going to play into this as you look forward, including inflation and other things like that. So is it actually going to go down, on a standard dollar basis, or is it going to go down, as adjusted for inflation is a different thing. But the goal is to try to decrease that.
Regent. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to comment, Chancellor Martin, on that specific question?
Please forgive me for commenting, but I don't think it's at all realistic to say that the cost of educating a student will go down. It might depend on what kind of campus, but let's just take Madison as an example. By and large, the new students we'll have are not going to be returning adult students. I'm not convinced that returning adult students or non-traditional students cost less to educate in any case. But I think that we can't at one and the same time ask for differential tuition increases because we don't have enough money to educate our undergraduate students well, and then say we can do it for less. Sorry.
I just want to comment. I think a lot of this will depend on the nature of your student body. And I think right, and we'll have to figure out how we distribute that all out when we see where the growth is and of what kinds of students and who's meeting goals and who's not. But well, I think if you look at the larger numbers we're shooting for and assume that, again, a much larger proportion of those students will need less credit from us because they'll be transferring in, they'll be getting credit for learning demonstrated from life experience, they'll have a very different pathway through our institutions. They won't be the typical student who now comes to Madison as an 18-year-old and stays for 4, 5, or 6 years using all of the services that entails. That doesn't mean that the portion of the services we deliver to those working adult students will be less in quality or that we'll spend less on that portion. But I'm assuming that we'll have them for less amount of time, and we'll have to spend then less money because they won't be with us, for instance, for 6 years. They'll be coming in with credit earned, and we'll have them for 2 years. Now, will that play out that way? Well, I think if we have a lot more working adults, returning adults, transfer students who come in and complete, I think there's good reason to believe it will turn out that way.
Chancellor Gao.
Just there may be confusion as well. Not all campuses have the same goals, and our campus is a very traditional campus. If you get into the fine print, our goals are much different from some of the other ones, and the funding is different as well. So I don't know that I think you may be thinking this is all just equal, and it's not. The other point I want to make, on the 2% on the pay plan, the longer that time goes by, that isn't a raise or an increase. That actually becomes a pay cut. And as you saw the other day, the U.S. News rankings came out, and our system, wow, I mean, we are very highly regarded around the nation, and people ask me, how do you do that? Well, it's our people. It's the faculty and the staff that work with the students, and that any students, and I know there was a strong interest here in the underrepresented minority students. that population, clearly you've got to have people providing support and guidance and time. And if we want to do more, we've got to make sure our people are compensated appropriately. And as you've heard, our research shows that just to begin with, we're behind. As Regent Drew has said, if we don't make that a very, very high priority, the 2%, we will fall even further behind. And I can tell you, and I think my colleagues would agree, we like to think we're good leaders and managers, but it takes a lot of skill to keep people motivated, to keep delivering quality education when their compensation continues to fall behind. So I know I said this at the last meeting, and maybe I'm kind of a broken record, but I just think that is vitally, vitally important in the mix here of some very good ideas, that the 2% restoration is one that we advocate for very vigorously, and I would be happy to help with that at the legislature.
Regent Falbo.
I have a couple of comments on I'm not typically politically correct, and I'll try not to be in this case, but...
Don't let us down, Regent Falbo.
I agree with Biddy, and I agree with Kevin. I think you're defining two different populations in sources. Students are our sources, and we're going after more sources. There's different ways to define them, but I sit here and listen, and I agree with both of you, that it's not going to be cheaper to educate the traditional student. It's not, but we will gain some efficiencies and cost saves on the type of student, Kevin, that you define. Now, past that, I have a different question here. We have the 80,000 new undergraduate goal by 2025. Over the course of the next 5 years, we are increasing our graduation, if I use 910 as the base, by under 2,600 graduates. We're going to be sprinting the next 10 years. I know there's a ramp-up time, but this really isn't on the track to get us to that goal, unless I'm doing something wrong with these numbers.
Let me ask Rebecca to talk about that.
First of all, I think if you think back to the presentation that we did in April, the 80,000 is cumulative over those years.
Yes.
So, and you're right, there is definitely a ramp up. What we're talking about at this stage is an investment on the beginning of a pathway to ramp us up to that, to those numbers. We have the trajectories. We have trajectories for each campus, and so I believe it is on track to get us there.
Okay, so those last 10 years, we're really going to be running.
Well, there are a lot of investments that will have to be in place for us to do that in those last 10 years. Capital is one of them. You know,
no, I'm not.
And things that we can't have in place in the first 5 years.
Okay. I just wanted to state that I'm showing very slow progress in the first.
You're right. It's slow at the beginning.
Looking at the $83 million for new budget GPR and fee initiatives, could somebody maybe talk to why that split between $66 million in GPR and $17 million in fees is the way it is?
New initiatives for the University of Wisconsin system that deal with providing additional services and instruction to students are split on a basis of 65% being assumed to be provided by the state and 35% being assumed to be provided through tuition dollars. So when we're looking at more graduates and we focus in on the piece related to additional access and additional enrollment, those are using the 65-35 split. When we look at research, though, research is traditionally 100% funded by the state. So that's why there is such a significantly larger piece on the GPR side as opposed to the tuition side, because we're asking for all of that from state resources. There is on the UW-Milwaukee piece a split there with the assumption that some of those are going to be going to education of students, and so there is some GPR fee split there as well.
Follow. Well, I always have difficulty with trying to strike the balance between asking for too much and seen as out of touch with the current fiscal realities in the state, and asking for too little and realizing that you'll never get anything you don't ask for.
Right.
And so could we maybe talk more to why it wouldn't be a good idea to ask for more or even all GPR support because that's what we need, and then bargain down to what's actually fiscally we're actually economically able to do in the state with fees as a part of the initiatives?
Well, I think President Riley kind of mentioned the budget process. In fact, he did, in fact, mention the budget process that we went through in trying to reach the right number in terms of what we should submit to the state in new initiatives. Only about a third of the initiatives that came forward for funding actually flowed through and is part of this budget. We went through the same process, I think, that you're asking about, and that is we ask ourselves, given the economic conditions in the state and the country, what is an appropriate ask of the state in this 2011-2013 budget? And we came to that number. We felt that these investments that we're asking in this budget is appropriately balanced. It allows us to go forward, to build the infrastructure necessary to ensure that when we ramp up in the outer years, getting at something that Regent Falvo was talking about, that we have a good base on which we can run real hard to ensure that we get those 80,000 graduates. So we went through that balancing. We ask ourselves, what is an appropriate ask? And let me just say this. In our discussions with leaders in the legislature, I have to say that there's some concern on their part in terms of whether or not, in fact, this is the right number. Some look at that number and ask themselves and ask us, well, is this an appropriate number given all the realities of the economy? Is it not a little high? We try to, as I said, balance as we debated internally about what is the appropriate number. We think this is a good number at the end of the day.
Okay.
And could I respond to, and I think, the last set of dialogues here is really on the main question you struggle with in building a budget. How much do you ask for, and how much is realistic, how much is likely to get you back the maximum infusion by the state, how much is going to be so much that you get a negative reaction, how much is too little and you leave money on the table. These are things that keep some of us up at night trying to figure out. And the problem with this is you never know the answer. There's never a clear answer to that question, so you're always, at some level, shooting in the dark. But the particular thing I wanted to mention to you, Regent Wingate, was that 65-35 split that you see there is a very traditional split that the state over many biennia has come to expect us to come in with. So I think just by virtue of that history and tradition, right or wrong, if we were to go in and say, well, we're going to reverse decades of doing it that way, would be seen by people who have the corporate memory at the state level as the university being wildly unrealistic, reversing decades of what the shared responsibility and payment should be between the state and the students and families who avail themselves of the higher education.
Yeah.
Chancellor Wells.
I guess for my broken record on this topic to try to tie these two things together, it's pretty clear, I think, to all of us that we have to figure out how to get more, and more importantly, better prepared graduates whose degrees and educations are aligned with the current and future needs of the economy and the community at lower per capita cost. So we can enhance the confidence and get a larger investment to deal with the issues of keeping the talent by better compensation. We are not going to get a larger investment or a larger share of the dollar, as we keep talking about around the state, if we don't engender the confidence that we're going to have to play our role. We are going to have to transform and continue to transform the way we do things. The cost will not go down unless we transform how we create more better prepared graduate degrees that are aligned to make the case that the students will be willing to pay their fair share of that resource in the state investing in it, the private donors and everybody else. And I know it's not popular in my own community when I say a lower per capita cost, but I can tell you in the venues that I work in with business groups and so on and so forth, the economic summit things, we went around and talked to the editorial boards, our foundation leaders. This is what resonates with them. This gives them the sense that we're committed
to helping make this work as well. So it's not going to be easy, but I agree with Joe and Biddy and others too, that we've got to do something about this compensation issue. But we're not going to be able to do anything about it if we don't address the larger and harder challenge and prove we're doing better and closing gaps between graduation retention gaps, as the discussion was earlier. That's part of what we have to do. We won't get the confidence for the investors to invest more in us of an increasingly shrinking dollar for investment.
He was great at the Oshkosh Northwestern and the Appleton Post-Crescent. I just want you to know. Thank you, Rick. Back to you. Danae?
I want to make a request in light of the conversation, particularly of Regents Loftus and Falbo, and some of the whispering we were doing between us, and that is that much like the charts that have been ingrained in my head, and you can test me and I'll get an A on the growth agenda framework, more jobs, more graduates, I think it would be helpful to me as a regent. This is kind of in line also with President Pruitt's comments when the governor was here. If I had some kind of visual that I kept seeing that allowed me to see two things. One, the distribution of how we're going to get that 80, that trajectory that Senior Vice President Martin talked about. Does that just demote you? Is she Senior Vice President? Okay, that's great. Okay. But, you know, the distribution across the campuses, including the 2 years. And same with the 5,900, you know, thing. Which campuses are responsible for what the 2,200 and the 3,000, whatever that math is. I just need a visual, some kind of chart, and we need to keep it front and center so that we as regents, and I think this is our responsibility, can participate in ensuring that we reach the goal by paying attention. I would not like to see a situation where 2 years from now, 5 years from now, the regents, it's too late for us to see an adjustment, not accusing anybody of anything, but if there's some way to do a visual, like the growth agenda visual, that we just kind of keep top of mind and are able to memorize at some point and really absorb, I think that would be helpful because there's a lot of information that we get.
Okay, I don't know that we can get it into one visual because there are a lot of moving parts there, but we will try. And I will also say that we are right now working on how we're going to reflect these targets in the annual accountability report at both the system and the institutional levels. So we're building those into those reports as well. Now there are, I want to be quick to say here, while we are all working together, and I'm working very closely with the provosts on what we're going to do now to help us move towards those goals, particularly in the area of retention. Without investment from the state, we're not going to be able to hold our campuses accountable to the targets that they've put out there because there is definitely a resource piece. So we may be back needing to rethink some of those goals. But we're not standing still in the meantime because we know, Regent Falbo, that we have to be moving now if we're going to move the bar, if we're going to hit any of those goals 3, 4, 5 years from now. We can't wait to see what happens with state funding.
So include the investment envelope also. I mean, I'm way in favor of that because if there's opportunities for us to advocate, not just now, as part of the biennial budget process, but ongoing, you know, that will be helpful. Thank you for that.
Let me also just add, I mean, I think, and alluding back to Regent Crane's comment earlier, I think this can also, your suggestion, dovetailing with committee priorities and sort of deeper dives that can occur, not just at the full board member level, but obviously at the standing committee level would also be well worth, you know, Regent's time and attention. Regent Loftus.
Back to the 75% number, probably a dangerous number to throw at the legislature, but what are the mechanics of this that the additional students that the legislature only has to appropriate enough money to cover 75% of that cost of instruction, then of course, they're not going to, that's a reduction in the gross number that university gets, or is it the system gets? If Chancellor Gao doesn't want to add one student, and he can make his graduation goals without doing that, is he still going to get a cut because we've asked for this?
It's not a cut of it's not a cut of current resources for the system or for the institutions. The institutions would retain the base of resources that they currently have. What we're looking at is the additional cost related to adding students. And when we look at costs per student, we're looking at all the components that fold into that. It's not just the student services, instruction, and academic support services that are really the direct costs only. It also includes some overhead charges related to administration, some related to physical plant operations, those kinds of things. So part of what we're going to be doing as we move forward is trying to look at some strategic financing things that we can do to reduce our costs, in addition to the types of things that we've already talked about. And the amount of money that goes to an institution is really based upon that 75%, again, only for new enrollments, not improved retention. In improved retention, what we're looking at is we are asking the state to provide 75% under the new enrollments for each new student. Under retention, we're asking them to provide 100% of what they would typically provide. The students themselves are going to come with the tuition that they traditionally provide. When they enroll, they have to pay tuition, so that will get added on. So each student will have the state resources plus the tuition resources. And so it really is trying to make sure that we're being as efficient in looking at how we provide resources to new students as we possibly can, and making sure that we are moving towards a goal of becoming more efficient and effective.
But is this then a new line, a separate line in the budget?
Each DEN request is a separate initiative that comes with separate resources. It will not be a separate appropriation. It would probably be coming into our largest appropriation. It is then up to us to be accountable for the resources that we have, and that's part of what we're looking at with the changes to performance measures and the changes related to what we are actually doing as far as how we're working with the campuses on their plans, so we can make sure that we are following through on the goals that we have. And each campus's resources that they're getting, as you said, if Joe Gow is participating a little less in the enrollment growth piece, he won't get as much new resources as another campus that is committed to having larger enrollment growth. Rebecca, do you want to add?
Do you have those numbers? Because it is, I think that's why people may be confused. I mean, our campus would get about $660,000 because our goals are relatively modest, because we're a very traditional operation. We have the second smallest geographic-wise campus. We're about at capacity. We don't do a lot online. You will find other campuses where the numbers are in the millions because they may be doing extensive online offerings. They may have access to non-traditional students who have credit already. So, I mean, it's quite variable, and you know, that would be helpful.
And we have those numbers. We showed them to you at an earlier meeting. We don't physically have them with us now, but we can get them out to you.
The other thing I would just state to remember, when we talk about lowering the cost of degrees, I think we'd all like to do that. The thing that I hope everyone will remember, we are challenged because of the economy and recession. And I would not want anybody to get the idea that somehow our faculty and staff have failed in what they do and therefore do not deserve. I think that's exactly the wrong notion. And so I'm often reminded, you know, why we are where we are and with a broken funding model is because of the state and the national economy, not because our people are somehow deficient in what they do. It's on the contrary. And so just to be clear on that.
I do not, this is an incredibly important decision that we have, improving the operating budget of the University of Wisconsin system. I just want to do my due diligence and acknowledge that the clock on the wall says it's about 12:35. We're about 35 minutes behind where we thought we might be. That doesn't mean I want to cut off anything. I only want to make that observation and encourage anyone else to offer any other questions, comments on any of the topics. Chancellor Wells.
I'll do this quickly. Now I lost my train of thought. But
Don't make any promises you can't keep.
No, I'm not going to make a promise. But this issue of just trying to connect another thing we're trying to do here with trying to challenge to have lower per capita costs is the management flexibilities, which ties directly to the compensation issue. We do not have control over the resources at the right timing and integrated in the front end of the budget for us to be able to address compensation issues in terms of playing off positions to compensation and things that we've talked about before. So when you look at how all this is packaged, it makes a lot of sense, but it's conditional. If we can't get management flexibilities, or the ones that are listed in there, it's going to be very difficult for us to reduce those costs. If our faculty and staff don't see us getting those and then seeing their compensation change because they're doing things in different ways that lower costs, we can't incent that. So these things are all tied together, and that was the last point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Chancellor Martin.
For the reason that Rick has just articulated, I would love to see the Regents go on record as making these requests conditional. I think without the added flexibility, there's no way for us to lower the cost of anything. The cost to educate one student, the cost to do research, it simply won't be possible. I also think it needs to be conditional on getting the cost to continue and having our base budgets kept up with where they were, including the furlough savings. Because I'm simply telling you honestly, our faculty, were it not already stretched terribly, you would not have awarded us differential tuition increases. We showed you what the problems are for undergraduate students, getting into the courses they need, getting the majors they need, getting the quality education that we really need to offer Wisconsin students. We can't simply promise to do things. I know that what I'm saying is not as politically popular as if we said we can do all of this no matter what. But we can't do all of this no matter what. And I'm standing here on behalf of the faculty, the staff, and the students at Madison, and I think the other campuses saying these institutions are stretched to the limit. And we want to be able to do what's right for the state. But if it's not deemed as conditional, I think we're setting ourselves up to make promises we will not be able to keep to the people of the state of Wisconsin. And I don't want to be in that position.
One of the thoughts across my mind as I'm listening to all of this discussion and I'm thinking of future budgets, from my perspective, and obviously purely from a non-accountant point of view, but more from a governance, is as I think in terms of the future, I would consider future budgets as being very successful budgets if the demonstration is there that we are significantly controlling the growth of the cost to educate students, and that we're doing. And I think that this system has the capability to do that. I think that an extremely successful budget would be where we show that we don't have to grow. And I would rather leave it that we will be extremely pleasantly surprised if we actually show a reduction in cost to educate. I don't think I'm looking to, as I'm hearing all of this discussion and seeing all of this information, I cannot look to the future and say this is going to be a process that's going to lead us to a cost in the reduction of per student cost. In light of the economy, in light of many things that we're talking about, I just, I think it would be rather foolhardy to to allow ourselves to be placed publicly, as is the case with the university system, that everything we say here is transmitted, in a sense, to the world. And I'd hate to see newspapers and others saying the Regents have accepted that their plan is it's going to be a reduction in the cost of student education. I'm just not very comfortable in that. I think that what I'm much more comfortable is, and I know that that one I do believe we can absolutely deliver because we have the talent pool, is that the increased costs will be significantly monitored and controlled so that it does not get out of hand, more so than saying we're going to reduce it. I just don't think that that's an area we want to go into and have the news media say that's what we're committed to.
Mr. Falvey.
I look at that. I'm going to make the motion as soon as I say something. I look at this as a culmination of all the goals and priorities that we've all approved already and we've all endorsed, that Kevin and the people in the system and the chancellors and everybody at the campuses have put forward to us. And I look at this as after we've all gone through a lot of work and what's in here and trying to understand it, the briefings and everything else, that it's an endorsement of our leadership to approve this, to say, yes, this is how you're going to get to those goals that we've all endorsed and we're all 110% in agreement on. So with that, I would make a motion to approve the operating budget.
Second. I would just, if I could just offer one quick comment related to the comments of the chancellors, I know Kevin feels the same way. If the issue of conditionality is not explicit, it is certainly implicit. I think in every conversation at this point going forward, and I think we have heard this group loud and clear, and I think I speak for my colleagues in terms of the recognition of the interconnectedness between all of what we're advancing going forward, and that will be subjects for future conversations. Clearly, if one doesn't happen, the implications of whether we can't pay our employees in a competitive way, if we don't achieve additional flexibilities in order to run the institutions that you folks are responsible for running, that all those kinds of things don't happen, other things will go away. And I think we need to be clear of that. If we're not, if it's not explicit in the budget proposal that we send to the other end of the street, it's certainly, I think, implied by all of what we're doing.
And let me add on that. I want to assure the board and the chancellors that when Michael and I were down meeting with the legislative leadership last week, we gave them that chart you're all sick of seeing. Dave, you want to put it back up? The green circles chart with the flexibility and the state support, and we said we've got to have these things in order to do the things we're promising. Now, being a bit of a poker player, I don't believe in telling people in the middle of the poker game exactly where you are with your hand, because this is a game that will play out over a lot of months with the new governor and new legislature, and we need to be a little bit coy as we play this game. But we're putting hard numbers out there, and we're saying this is what we believe we need to do for the state, and we need you, the state, to step up and do those two things in the green circles, the state support and the flexibility to get to the goals we've laid out.
Thank you. I think we're completed. All those, the motion on the floor is for Resolution 1.2, approving the biennial budget. They've been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Let me just do a quick review of where we're going from here. It is now 12:45. It was supposed to be 12. I'm sorry. My agenda was supposed to be 12. Box lunches outside. There is a joint meeting of the Education and Business and Finance Audit Committee here beginning at 1 o'clock now. That will, the Capital Planning and Budget Committee will meet at 1 o'clock at 1418, and we will then resume as an all-regions closed session in an ideal world at 3 o'clock.